So there's this phenomenon in psychology called semantic satiation. It's what happens when you repeat a word over and over until it just temporarily loses all its meaning and becomes this absurd sound. Like door, 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 door.
Like it just turns into noise.
Exactly, just noise. But what happens when you encounter a text that does the exact opposite? A text where the repetition doesn't strip away the meaning, but it actually like hammers it into the foundation like a nail. It becomes this landscape you just have to walk through, which is exactly what we are doing today in this deep dive.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating journey.
It really is. So you, the listener, have handed us this document, and it's titled Weight Loss Recipes Without Processed Foods Podcast, 1,400 words, ... yelix. And, I mean, on the surface, you probably expect a list of step-by-step cooking instructions, right? Or maybe a catalog of ingredients.
A standard recipe book, basically.
Right. But opening this document, it just hits you with something entirely different. It is this single, dense, philosophy-packed paragraph, and it's repeated endlessly, just over and over. It's almost like a meditation or, I don't know, a mantra. Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into this today because instead of getting lost in the weeds of, like, how many ounces of chicken to bake, this document repeats its core philosophy unrelentingly. It just refuses to let us get distracted.
It really does. And establishing that calm, almost unrelenting rhythm, it's a really fascinating rhetorical choice by the author. When a text repeats itself this aggressively, it actually forces us to look closely at the specific words chosen.
Because there's nowhere else to look.
Exactly. Every single noun, every single verb, it's been selected to survive that repetition. Because there's zero filler, each word carried this immense, undeniable weight. We can't just skim past it. We have to sit with it and really analyze the blueprint it's offering.
Yeah, we have to really digest it. And before we look at a single ingredient, the text demands that we start with the foundational mindset required for any of this to work. The very first sentence of this repeating mantra says, healthy weight loss begins with sustainable habits rather than quick fixes.
A crucial distinction.
Huge. And I was thinking about this contrast in the context of being back in university. Think about the concept of quick fixes in dieting. It feels remarkably similar to cramming all night for a massive final exam.
Oh yeah, the all-nighters.
Right. You stay up for 48 hours, you chug energy drinks, and you just memorize a mountain of flashcards. And maybe you pass the test the next morning, but like 3 days later, you have forgotten every single thing you read.
It's gone.
Completely gone. Because your brain was just holding on to it temporarily under extreme duress. Compare that to sustainable habits, which is like the student who actually goes to class, pays attention, and studies for 30 minutes every single day over a 4-month semester. The night before the exam, they're sleeping soundly. So if the source emphasizes this contrast first, before giving us a single dietary instruction, what does that tell us about the biological framework required before we even look at a menu?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the text is actively dismantling the commercialized illusion of transformation. It's doing that by acknowledging the biological reality of homeostasis.
Homeostasis meaning balance, right?
Your body is a highly complex machine, and it is designed to keep things exactly the same. So when you employ a quick fix, like a severe calorie restriction or some intense juice cleanse, your body has no idea you're trying to look good for a beach vacation.
It doesn't care about your swimwear.
Not at all. It thinks you are entering a famine. It responds to that emergency state by slowing down your metabolism and clinging to every single ounce of energy it can.
Wow, so it actually fights you.
It actively fights you. The cramming analogy you used works perfectly because a quick fix is an emergency protocol. And you just cannot live in an emergency state forever. Your biology will eventually rebel, and it's going to drive you to binge in order to replenish those depleted stores.
Right, because it thinks you're starving.
Exactly. So by putting this sentence first, the force document dictates that you just have to abandon that rush timeline altogether. You have to build a biological environment that your body feels safe in year-round, rather than forcing it into this panic state that it will inevitably fight back against.
That concept of biological safety it's a tough pivot for a lot of people, especially when the diet industry basically thrives on selling us those panic states. Right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a billion-dollar industry built on panic.
Yeah. But the document, it doesn't linger to make you feel bad about your past diets. It immediately pivots. It owes us a sustainable alternative, and it delivers this very specific dietary inventory. It tells us to focus on whole foods, and it provides this rapid-fire list. It says vegetables, fruits, lean protein, healthy fats, and fiber.
And notice what isn't there. There are no branded supplements, no complex chemical formulas, no exotic powders, just the raw materials of human nutrition.
Yeah, here's where it gets really interesting because the text simply lists these items side by side in a single breath. Vegetables, fruits, lean protein, healthy fats, fiber. It doesn't give us ratios. It doesn't say, eat 50% this and 20% that.
Right, no math involved.
None. And it doesn't single out an ultimate superfood you need to eat every day. It just presents them together. I have to play devil's advocate for a second, though. We are heavily conditioned to look for the hero ingredient, the magic berry from the Amazon or the ultimate protein hack. We could visualize this as a symphony where all parts are equal, but I'm still wondering, are we losing something by not prioritizing? How should you, the listener, build a plate when there is absolutely no hierarchical ranking in the text?
It's a fair question. But searching for a hierarchical ranking or like a solo superfood, that actually reverts us right back to the quick fix mindset from the first sentence.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's reductionist thinking. What the text is doing by listing them side by side without percentages or strict macronutrient breakdowns is synthesizing the list under the holistic umbrella of whole foods. It deliberately refuses to separate the macros, your proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, from the micros and the structural elements.
Let's define micros really quickly for the listener so we don't get bogged down in jargon.
Yeah.
We are talking about micronutrients, right? Like the vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants that our bodies need in small amounts to function.
Precisely. And the structural elements are things like fiber and water. In nature, these elements just don't exist in isolation. You don't find a pure, isolated macronutrient growing on a tree somewhere.
Right.
Think of it like this. If you go to an auto parts store and you buy a steering wheel, 4 tires, and a spark plug, you don't have a car.
You just have a pile of junk in your garage.
Exactly. You just have a pile of parts. They only work when they are integrated into a complex matrix. Let's look at the biology of why the text groups them together. Take an apple, for example.
Okay.
An apple has carbohydrates, which are a sugar. If you were to extract just that sugar and drink it, it would flood your bloodstream instantly. That causes your pancreas to basically panic and dump a massive amount of insulin to clear the sugar away.
And that's when you get that terrible afternoon slump.
Right. 2 hours later, your blood sugar crashes and you feel exhausted and ravenous. But the whole food, the actual apple, contains that sugar bound up in a complex matrix of fiber.
So the fiber acts as like a physical barrier.
It acts like a net in your digestive tract. It literally traps the sugars and slows down gastric emptying. So the sugar releases into your bloodstream at a slow, steady drip instead of a massive flood.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's no insulin spike. There is no crash. The symphony analogy you mentioned earlier is apt, but it's fundamentally a mechanical reality. If you have lean protein, but you have no fiber to regulate the digestion, or no healthy fats to help your body absorb the fat-soluble vitamins, the micros we talked about, the machinery just stalls out. The holistic approach demands participation from the whole ensemble because that is exactly how human digestion evolved to operate.
Okay, so if the whole foods are the functional parts of the machinery and the synergy is what keeps the engine running smoothly, I'm left looking at the next section of the document with a lot of curiosity because the text doesn't stop at the edge of the plate.
No, it zooms out.
It seamlessly transitions from what goes into our mouths to how we manage our entire day. It lists hydration, regular movement, quality sleep, and mindful eating. It places a psychological concept, mindful eating, right next to physical requirements.
Which is very intentional.
Right, so it's like the food might be the hardware or the fuel for the car. But this implies there's an entirely different system we have to manage simultaneously. It's like the text is telling us that the way you drive the car, the mindfulness, is just as important as the fuel you put in it.
That's a great way to put it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it refuses to separate diet from existence. This is a radical redefinition of healthy weight loss compared to traditional diet advice, which usually tries to isolate calories in a vacuum.
Yeah, just calories in, calories out.
Right. But this document argues that you cannot out-eat a lifestyle that is biologically broken. Let's look at the physiological weight of these elements. Sleep, for example, isn't just about feeling rested. It is a profound metabolic event. When you cut your sleep short, your brain alters its chemical signaling. It pumps up the production of ghrelin, which is the hormone that signals hunger, and it suppresses leptin, the hormone that signals satiety.
Wait, really? So a bad night of sleep chemically rigs your brain to overeat the next day?
It biologically forces you to seek out quick energy, usually in the form of simple sugars, because your body is desperately trying to compensate for the lack of cellular repair.
That explains the donut cravings when I'm tired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Furthermore, just a few nights of poor sleep can induce temporary insulin resistance, meaning your body becomes way less efficient at managing the whole foods you're actually putting into it. And hydration works on a similarly deceptive loop.
How so?
Mild dehydration often masquerades as fatigue or mild hunger. Your brain misinterprets the signal entirely, and instead of drinking a glass of water, you reach for a snack. Machinery is misfiring.
That makes total sense. That explains the hardware maintenance. But the text includes mindful eating, which feels more like software, you know? If hydration and sleep are keeping the engine cool, mindful eating seems to be the operating system directing the whole process. But what happens when that operating system gets a virus?
What do you mean?
Let's say someone is chronically stressed at work. They are scrolling through emails while scarfing down a salad at their desk. They are eating the whole foods, but the mindfulness is completely absent. Does the document imply that ruins the physical benefit of the food?
It significantly compromises it, yes.
Yeah.
When you eat in a state of stress or distraction, your autonomic nervous system leans toward the sympathetic state. That's your fight or flight mode.
Right.
But digestion requires the parasympathetic state, which is the rest and digest mode. If you are blasting your system with cortisol because you are stressed about a work email, your body literally diverts blood flow away from your digestive tract and out to your extremities.
Because it thinks you need to run away from a bear.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you are eating the most nutrient-dense meal on the planet. If your software is running a stress program, you cannot efficiently absorb those nutrients. By placing mindful eating in the same breath as vegetables and hydration, the text insists that the state of your nervous system while you eat is nutritionally equivalent to the food itself.
Man, if you are listening to this on your commute right now, feeling guilty because you didn't do a massive workout this morning, or because you drank coffee instead of water, this text is essentially asking you to look at the entire 24-hour cycle. But this brings up a massive friction point for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the whole foods are the instruments and sleep and hydration are the concert hall, I am still wondering how the average person, who is probably already exhausted and overwhelmed, is supposed to orchestrate all of this without just giving up on day 3. The document gives us an operating manual stating this is achieved through, quote, small, consistent actions performed every day.
The crucial mechanism.
Yeah, but I have to push back hard on this. Small actions don't feel like they match the scale of the problem. If someone wants to completely change their health, how does drinking an extra glass of water or, like, taking a 10-minute walk actually move the needle biologically? It just sounds too easy.
I get that. To understand why the text specifically mandates small actions, we actually have to look at neuroscience, specifically how the brain processes change. We have this almond-shaped cluster of nuclei in our brains called the amygdala.
Right, the fear center.
Yes, it is the fear center, and it is constantly scanning the environment for threats. Massive sweeping lifestyle overhauls like throwing out all your food on a Sunday, committing to a grueling 2-hour daily workout, and drastically cutting your calories, that triggers the amygdala's threat response. Your brain interprets that massive sudden change as a survival risk.
Oh, wow.
So it floods you with resistance, anxiety, and this overwhelming desire to return to your old, safe baseline.
Which explains why New Year's resolutions usually collapse by February. The brain is literally fighting the scale of the change.
Exactly. Intense, occasional effort requires a massive amount of willpower and activation energy just to override that amygdala response. And willpower is a finite cognitive resource. It depletes when you are tired, when you're stressed, or when you're making hundreds of decisions at work.
Right, decision fatigue.
Exactly. But a small action that bypasses the threat response entirely, pausing for 3 deep breaths before you eat to engage that parasympathetic nervous system we talked about, or taking a 10-minute walk after lunch. These actions are so small that the amygdala just ignores them. They slip right under the radar.
But do they actually do anything? If they're small enough to slip under the radar, aren't they, too small to matter?
They matter deeply because of neuroplasticity. Every single time you perform a small action, neurons in your brain fire together. And the rule is, when they fire together, they wire together, creating a new neural pathway. Repeating that small action every day, just as the text commands, triggers a process called myelination.
Myelination.
Yes, the brain wraps that specific neural pathway in a fatty substance called myelin. It acts like insulation on a copper wire. It actually makes the electrical signal travel faster and more efficiently. Over time, That small action stops being a choice that requires willpower, and it becomes an automatic biological reflex.
That is wild.
Massive overhauls collapse because they rely on willpower. Small, consistent actions succeed because they structurally rewire the brain to make the healthy choice your default state. It is basically the law of compounding interest, but applied to human biology.
So it's like compound interest. That completely reframes it. Because small, consistent actions is incredibly unsexy.
That really is.
It won't sell a magazine cover, right? Because we want the movie montage where the hero flips a giant tire up a snowy mountain. But the text is telling us that real biological change isn't a montage. It is the quiet Tuesday morning where your brain is structurally wired to choose the apple instead of the donut without you even having to fight yourself over it.
That's the real victory.
Which brings us to the ultimate payoff of this blueprint. We've covered the biological mindset, the whole food components, and the neurological method of small actions. Finally, we look at the specific outcomes the text promises. It says these small actions, quote, lead to lasting health, improved energy, and better weight management. So, what does this all mean? There is a brilliant subtlety here. The title of this source document is Weight Loss Recipes Without Processed Foods. It literally used the term weight loss to get us in the door.
It did.
But in the final payoff, the phrase better weight management is listed last. It trails behind health and energy.
This raises an important question about how we fundamentally measure success. The document baits the hook with weight loss because that is our cultural obsession.
Right, everyone wants to lose weight.
But once you are inside the philosophy, it elegantly re-educates you on the biology of metrics. It frames weight management not as the primary goal, but as a lagging indicator.
Okay, let's break down that concept of a lagging indicator for the listener because it's usually used in economics, not biology.
Right. So in economics, a leading indicator is something you can measure right now that predicts future outcomes. A lagging indicator is the result that you only see after the fact. You cannot directly manage a lagging indicator. You can only manage the behaviors that lead to it.
Okay, I see where you're going.
The text reveals that your physical weight is a lagging indicator. You cannot just reach into your body, turn a dial, and change your cellular mass today. But what are the leading indicators of the things you can actually feel, track, and manage right now? Lasting health and improved energy.
I have to stop you there, though. If weight is just a lagging indicator, how do I know my small, consistent actions are actually working? If I am putting in all this effort, eating the whole foods, doing the deep breathing, and the scale doesn't move for 3 weeks, human nature dictates that I am going to quit. How does the text address that immense psychological gap between the action and the lagging result?
It addresses it by shifting your attention to the immediate feedback loops. If you optimize your sleep, as the text suggests, you don't lose 5 pounds overnight. But you do wake up with a measurable increase in energy.
Right.
That is a leading indicator. If you eat a meal composed of whole foods and fiber, you don't immediately change your body composition. But you do avoid that afternoon blood sugar crash we talked about. Your mental clarity improves. That is a leading indicator.
So it's about changing what you're paying attention to.
Exactly. The text is demanding that you redefine your metrics for success. If you secure lasting health and improved energy through whole foods and daily movement, the better weight management will inevitably follow. It is a trailing shadow of a functioning ecosystem.
But if you reverse the order.
If you reverse the order, if you chase the lagging indicator of weight loss first, which is usually done by starving yourself, cutting out entire macronutrient groups, or sacrificing sleep to do extreme workouts, the whole system collapses.
You break the machine.
Yes. You might force the scale to move temporarily, but you destroy your energy, you spike your cortisol, and you damage your metabolic health. By putting weight management last, the document restores the correct biological order of operations.
Weight management is the trailing shadow of a functioning ecosystem. I love that. That brings the entire source document full circle and reveals an incredibly tight piece of biological logic hidden inside this repetitive mantra. Let's consolidate the journey this text has taken us on.
Sounds good.
We discovered that true health isn't a complex mathematical secret guarded by industry elites, nor is it found in a magical superfood. It is a holistic biological ecosystem. It relies on a matrix of whole foods where fiber and macros work together to regulate your digestion and hormones.
Beautifully integrated.
Right. And it demands that mindful daily habits like sleep and nervous system regulation sit right next to the food on our plates because a corrupted operating system cannot process premium fuel. And most importantly, it is executed by bypassing the brain's threat response entirely, using small, consistent daily steps to literally rewire your neural pathways rather than relying on the exhausting, temporary willpower of a quick fix. It redefines the finish line, moving weight loss from a daily obsession to the natural byproduct of securing your energy and health first.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
It really is, which leaves us with the final thought for you to take away. We noted at the beginning that this document repeats its core paragraph relentlessly over and over. If the biological formula for health is truly this straightforward, if it is literally just these specific, unsexy elements repeated every single day, just like the text itself repeats, what is the mental friction that makes it so incredibly hard for us to accept the small and consistent path?
That is the big question.
Why do we fight the simplicity and constantly seek out the chaotic, flashy, quick fix? If you are listening on your commute or at your desk right now, what would happen if, starting tomorrow, you stopped looking for a massive overnight overhaul and instead treated this simple, repetitive paragraph as your daily biological manifesto?
It is a profound question to sit with. The resistance we feel to doing the small, quiet things every day reveals much more about the state of our modern minds than the capabilities of our bodies.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll be back next time to extract the insights from another fascinating document. Until then, keep questioning and keep learning.